Hi, I'm totally not named Dan, and I'm back with another video for one of my UniVersus decks, or My Hero Academia card game decks, whichever you prefer to call it. This time for Midoriya 1, or Deku as people prefer to call him. This deck, however, little different from the standard, because it has this card, Meteor Shower. We'll talk about that in just a second, but first, I'd like to bring in my buddy who's also played this deck, Chris.
Hi everyone. Thanks for having me on, not Dan. Yeah, this deck was a blast, so I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, so the reason you've played this deck is once I win with these decks at locals, I retire them, but I sort of keep them off to the side just in case anybody else wants to give them a go.
I think we'd finished a match early one evening at locals, and we were just talking about how different decks reflected the characters and sometimes at a certain point in their progression. And I think I had not realized kind of how flavorful Deku 1 was. And so you kind of pointed out that by ditching your hand, it was like Deku had broken his hand. And suddenly I was very interested in it. So I don't have all those cards, but you were luckily had retired your deck, and it was in the retirement home waiting for someone to come hire it out. So yeah, you were kind enough to give it to me for the evening, and it was a whole lot of fun.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I feel like it's a very difficult deck to learn and play.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. Like, because I'm a newer player, like I've generally tended towards quite straightforward decks without a lot of difficult decision making. So I kind of lean towards Earth a little bit, and I've gotten to know those cards quite well. As much as this is a little difficult, I think that the difficulty lies in like when to dump your hand. Like that's the biggest decision point, and I think will be the decider of the match for you. Basically, the other parts aren't too difficult to pilot. Like I think that you obviously your unique aspect of this is Meteor Shower, but the other parts, he's punchy, and that's
he do be punchy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got into playing this guy because when they first announced My Hero, we had only two decks. We had Deku and Bakugo. Mm-hmm. And it was a case of either you have the big blow up your stuff for damage guy, or you have the huge damage at the cost of your ability to do anything else guy.
Yeah, he really is kind of all or nothing in that way. But it makes for a lot of fun because I don't think any other deck that I've played in my small experience has that level of kind of gambling to it.
Yeah, he's a very fun sort of thinky aggro. He is extremely aggro, but you have to think about what you're doing constantly.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's quite straightforward. Like that you've got that first enhance that's I guess embodying that idea that Deku is quite smart and can think his way through difficult situations. And that part is kind of a fun window dressing gimmick. But yeah, like the main thrust of the deck is like get in some really big damage and possibly in just one or two hits.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just window dressing. If we look at the deck real quick, that first ability is you guess your opponent's next attack zone. If you succeed, -3 speed. So the relevant bit of that here is that a lot of the time Deku gets stuck with one zone in hand, and basically by guessing you're telling people what zone you have, right?
Yeah.
And Meteor Shower changes that. Meteor Shower, you can discard a card, replace it with Meteor Shower at any time. You always have a +3 mid block. And +3 mid is not a great block. But when it's got -3, it's essentially a 0 mid. So there is never anything you won't be able to partial.
Yeah, and I think I probably undersold it when I said it was kind of a window dressing. Because it was really useful, actually. There was times when I just didn't have what I needed in hand to block what I knew was coming or what might be coming based on the character I was playing against. And so I would look at my hand and just try and bait them into making an attack that I could block by predicting an attack that I would not be able to block.
And predicting the wrong zone is a great way to bait people. There is a lot of thinking and double thinking in this deck. Yeah, if you know what your opponent's going to play, you can block it more easily. If you know your opponent can play one of two things, you can say the thing you don't want them to play to try and bait them into playing the one you do. There's a lot with that. The other purpose of Meteor Shower here is specifically you can pick up a whole bunch of Meteor Shower in a turn, you can play a whole bunch of Meteor Shower in a turn. Every single one of those is a 5 damage poke. You don't expect to kill with Meteor Shower, but the moment your opponent hits 14 health or 15 health, Aspiring Punch becomes a kill card.
Yeah, I really liked the deck for that reason. In that I'm very carefully watching the opponent's health and trying to time it so that like the Aspiring Punch is not, after a big string, because the difficulty might be quite high to pull it off.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the timing was everything. But in that respect, it made it a really enjoyable deck. Because again, I've never played another one that had that kind of decision making.
Yeah, generally this deck wants to kill over 2 turns. It's not a single turn kill. And it is worth noting you can't dump your hand on the Meteor Shower. You can dump your hand on literally any other attack in this deck. And we've got Aspiring Punch to gain 5 speed if you do so. We've got Reverse Throw as a throw, so the damage is guaranteed pretty much. We've got Future Charge, helps you pick up new cards after you've done it. There are various different ways of doing it. But while you generally want to hold back until you can kill with the Aspiring Punch, sometimes if you realize going into game 2 your opponent can't one-turn you, you want to just open with Velocity Punch, add a foundation to your momentum, follow up with a 6 difficulty Aspiring Punch, hit him for like 19 on turn 1, and then just tank whatever they throw at you. It's a huge risk, but if they go into your 3rd turn with like 9 health or something, there's very little they can do.
Yeah, I didn't get the chance to try out that kind of tactic. I got a bye in 1 round, and the games that are most memorable to me were against Mineta. Yeah, so Mineta's, the game was really slow, so we only got 1 round in an hour, because it took a long time, and it was interesting because I sensed this deck is not supposed to take that long, but it did. But yeah, speed was reduced a lot. Not much was getting through. Luckily, I did win, and it came over, like you said, 2 big shots. Lots of poking that didn't really go that far. Either the speed was reduced so much it could easily be blocked, or it was half blocked and the original damage wasn't very big anyway. But it was really fun to then wait for those 2 kind of Falcon Punch shots where you smash right through everything.
It is also worth noting, if the opponent doesn't know the deck, one thing is they're a lot less inclined to block your early attacks if they think a big one at the end is going to do 10 plus damage. So the pokes are actually significantly more successful in Deku than in most characters, just for that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that they might be willing to let those pokes go through, trying to maybe save a few really good blocks for later on.
Mineta, though, generally doesn't let anything through. Mineta is a crazy defensive character.
Yeah, it made for an interesting matchup. They say styles make fights, and it definitely made for one that, I haven't forgotten since, whereas, we've had plenty of games since that point that have kind of been committed to memory, and I can't recall right now, but that one was really memorable.
The most memorable one for me was the final round when I won with this, was against a Todoroki. And it was the Todoroki who has the ability to make both players pick up a momentum. So you're constantly thinking, what's where in their momentum? What's where in my momentum? How can I force them to give me the cards I need to block when I need to block with them?
Yeah, that's tricky. And I guess Meteor Shower worked a little bit differently than it might normally do. Because you're momentum a lot.
The entire matchup works differently because you've got an extra zone that you've got to be thinking about constantly on top of everything else this deck wants you to think about. It is an extremely thinky, high awareness deck.
Yeah, it did give me a taste for thinky decks. I think I would like to veer in that direction once I'm a little more confident. At the moment, like I said, I'm generally sticking to more straightforward ones. But I mean, that matchup with Todoroki kind of speaks to the strength of the game in general and its design. How certain characters can create almost like a mini game within the game happening.
Yeah, one of my favorites was a big webcam event. I went 0-5 or something. I lost the entire event terribly. But in the very finals, I was playing Mineta. I cycled my deck, lost 9 of my attacks, went, right, there is no way I can string together a combo long enough to actually deal damage at this point, because my opponent's good at blocking. How do I just sort of play out this game, draw things out, try and get them to mill themselves before I run out of cards? And it was a really good back and forth thinking game up until it came down to, was the last card in my deck a good check? If it was a good check, I succeeded. If it was a bad check, I failed and died. If I succeeded that check, my opponent milled out. They could not play another attack.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, again, like, it's interesting that you probably have this with other characters too because you're way more experienced, but, like, it's interesting that this particular character is creating, like, some quite memorable moments across, like, multiple matches and in multiple phases of the game.
Yeah. So the other thing this character does a lot is this character just really wants to draw cards to make up for the fact that they're expending their hand, right?
Yeah.
We've got Passing the Torch, which is a 2 difficulty, commit, draw a card. Great in any character. Extra great in this one, because if you have no hand, you get the 2 bonus cards.
Yeah, it was really good. Very, very useful on recovery. If you had it when you dumped your hand, you're celebrating. If you didn't have it, then you were kind of much more reticent to dump the hand.
Yeah. Preparing for battle, though, is also pretty good. This is enhanced commit, discard 1 card, draw 1 card, which on the face seems worse. But A, it's a 1 diff, so it's easier to play, and it's easier to play multiples of. And B, also, we have Any Means Necessary, which is a card that specifically responds to you discarding a card to draw you another card. So Any Means Necessary, I've put in a different row on the deck display, because that's not a foundation. If you draw that in your opening hand, don't count as a foundation. Because you just want to mulligan that back. You want to have that when you discard your hand, or when you discard Preparing for Battle, so that you can just pick up that extra card, have that extra card in hand. Preparing for Battle is better than Passing the Torch if you have Any Means Necessary. And it's just such a nothing card in the deck. You're essentially running 4 less cards. But better than that, because it helps refill.
Yeah, that kind of impulsive draw is really good for making sure that you can get kind of the right attack at the right time as well. Because, again, if you're stuck with a handful of foundations and you're in a position where you actually really need to get that kill shot off, it can be quite useful in that way.
Yeah. And likewise, we've got a little bit of draw on Future Charge. Future Charge helps you draw into the right attacks. You can draw a whole load off Future Charge if you draw multiple Future Charges, but that almost never happens. It's usually just draw 1. And you can use it to refill your hand after you've discarded. You almost never want to discard on the Future Charge, though, because it's a 3-speed mid. That's getting blocked.
Yeah, I didn't get many Future Charges through, and I appreciate the pokes are there for a similar reason, but, like, I never expected to get this one through.
Yeah, it's just a hand refill, really. The other one there, I guess, is the Reverse Throw. I forget that the Reverse Throw even has the draw on it, because it's not the point of Reverse Throw. The point of Reverse Throw is to force through half of your plus 10 damage. But if they don't block it, even if you don't pump damage, you get to draw a card. So it's essentially another Future Charge. And if they do block it, it feels bad, because they only stop 2 of the damage.
Yeah, and I know this is a very fringe benefit, but the fact it's Reverse Throw, I think sometimes people forget it's a punch. And so they're not thinking that you'll tack all that damage onto it. It's a nice one in that way too.
I'm still sad it doesn't have the other keyword, which is reversal, but that's a non-by-hero keyword.
Yeah, conspicuous by its absence for sure.
Just imagine throwing a 15 damage throw in response to blocking your opponent's attack, though.
Yeah, maybe one day.
Deku with reversals was insane. Because you could discard your hand on your opponent's turn for plus 10 damage, and then on the follow-up your turn, discard your hand again for plus 10 damage.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
So over 2 consecutive turns, with your opponent doing nothing in between, you could throw 30.
Yeah, Deku likes that format for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, speaking of getting attacks through, we have note-taking here. Just a 1 diff, you can throw down a bunch of them. Enhance flip, your punch attack gets plus 2 speed. It's not that necessary in the early game. However, in the late game, it's very important, because as your opponent builds up a stage, they can block more and more, and this, because it's plus 2 per foundation rather than plus 1 per foundation, basically just outraces their blocks.
Yeah, you feel really confident if you've got a couple of these down, because then you're like, all right, I can tap 2 and get +4 speed on my big move.
It's not even tap or commit. It's flip, so you can still use it to pass checks later.
That's true. It's flip, isn't it? So yeah, it's a really good one. I liked it.
It is a one-shot, but I mean, how many times are you going to need to force an attack through?
Yeah, not in this one. Not in this one. Like, you're not going to be doing it for the pokes. I imagine you'd do it every time for the one big punch.
Yeah. Then we got the high value target, which is the inverse. It's just 2 foundations when blocking. And given that this deck likes to block, it's there. It does the job.
Yeah, it helps you pace the battle out so you can kind of grind them down a little bit. Take some hits until you're ready. Just allows you to be a bit more adaptive.
And Wealthy Aspirations, it's a unique, but we run 4 of it. That's specifically for reasons I explained in another video that I'll link below. But basically, the word unique does not matter on this foundation, because of the way the rest of the foundation works. That enhance, useless, never touch it. In Toga now, it's becoming a lot more relevant, but in Deku, there is no point ever use the enhance. It's the response you want. Flip, after a card's added to your momentum, add the top card of your deck to your momentum. This just says, basically, when you add your Meteor Shower, you can still have another blank momentum to do the Aspiring Punch with, and not lose the Meteor Shower. That's all it's there for.
Yeah, you can keep your momentum topped up nice and high.
You never need 2 momentum except for the Meteor Shower, because really the only other thing you use the momentum for is that Aspiring Punch. And Aspiring Punch specifically eats one time in the entire game.
Yeah.
And yeah, we were talking about this guy partial blocking a lot, especially with the Meteor Shower. Wall Cling's there for that. Wall Cling just says it's a full block, no damage even if throw.
Yeah, it saved my bacon a couple of times, because I don't recall full blocking many attacks at all. So this was quite helpful for that.
It really depends on what you hold on to. You do have to think about the matchups a lot, especially against, say, Ochako, who just signposts the fact that she wants highs. You really have to hold on to your releases. You really have to hold on to your future charges. You really have to keep the right blocks for your opponent. And that was the other big thing about playing this deck. Yes, I won. Yes, I won every round of the event. I never won the first game of a round.
Well, that's interesting. Was that because you were like kind of getting to know their deck a little bit, so that when you played again, you could be a little bit more?
Definitely seemed like that. It definitely seemed like it was first game was learn the matchup, second game was win the matchup.
Yeah, I had a similar experience, but I assumed it's because I didn't know the deck that well. And so I was really gun shy about when to start like doing the big punches. And then you get the second game and I felt much more confident. I guess that's probably not the same experience for you, but you will probably be even more calculated.
No, there's definitely an element of that, because you got 28 health, but 28 health's nothing to some characters. You could just straight up die in one turn if you go all in. So you do have to know whether or not your opponent's capable of that before you make the big plays.
Gotta be careful on those Tokoyamis or like maybe even a Kaminari who can kill you in one turn very quickly. It might not be the first turn, but a one turn big burst can be quite difficult for this deck to cope with.
And the big one that's actually been going around lately is Ojiro 2. Because Ojiro 2 just says +2 damage, +2 speed on your first, +3 damage, +3 speed on your second. Pick back up the first, play it again with +3/+3, and the whole way through you can build, because there are attacks on Earth that will do that. When you build your one with nature, you just start discarding from that. Don't worry, there's enough draw that it doesn't matter. And then with that extra +2 to block modifier, your opponent's not stopping any of these attacks.
Yeah, Ojiro is from the series my favorite character that is currently printed, and so I liked him anyway, but like he plays really well. He plays in a quite straightforward way, but his ability to kind of, if you've got the right hand and Student of the Art is down, like to just do a really big long turn that is very difficult to block fully. it's a real grind. So the burst damage is definitely there.
Yeah, and this character specifically, because of his ability to name his own and Ojiro's predictability, he actually has one of the best matchups against Ojiro of anybody. And for that reason, and that reason alone, he came second recently in Oceania Nationals.
Oh, a nice result for old Deku.
Yeah.
That's really cool. He's almost like the kryptonite that's just been lying around for a while, waiting for the right Superman to come along.
Yeah, pretty much. There was a format where just everybody played Deku too, but I still think this guy's way more fun because he just does bigger versions of the thing. He doesn't discard one card, he discards his hand and he goes all in with a +10.
Yeah, a little more extreme. I guess
Yeah.
you're going to potentially get more extreme results, right? You're probably going to find that you either do very well or you don't. Less of those kind of 50-50s kind of, matches where you're trading.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, like he's a riot. Like this guy's super fun to play.
Oh, for sure. This is one of my favorites, definitely. And
yeah, I think if there's a player who hasn't done it, like they should at least give him a try. Like I don't think anyone would regret it.
Yeah. This is definitely a fun deck. This is definitely a fun casual deck. This particular deck, I would not suggest playing now, just because it's 2 sets behind at this point, and some really great stuff has come out since. In fact, some really great stuff has been reprinted since in Valiant Assault from the Red Horizon starter decks, which, for those who don't know, are basically just Jasko's OCs that are sort of partway between Fate's Day Night and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Yeah, it's I think that's becoming a very popular card, a difficult one to get hold of at the moment where we live.
And it's only going to get harder, I'm afraid, because they've just stopped doing the print-on-demand service that they had going for the original starter decks. You could buy those starter decks for £6 for the entire starter deck. Might even be $6, plus whatever postage is. And
the old
then
printing, not
you
so
get
difficult.
3 copies of the card in that. Yeah, it's the old printing, so it's not the fancy new foil one, but there is specifically a page in the rulebook that says this card is legal now.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, the fancy foil one is really good. The art on the new version is very nice, very crisp.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'll take what you can get, I think, until we can get those newer cards a little more easily.
Absolutely. And personally, I quite like just running the old cards because they look like the old cards. It shows off what the game used to be a bit.
Yeah, there's a retro appeal to them, to be sure, and they stand out on the board when everything else is in a similar format. It kind of gets conversations going where people are like, oh, what's that? I've never seen that before. And you're like, you have seen it. You just haven't seen this version.
Yeah, I love running the Mega Man one with nature.
Yeah, it's very cute. All the Mega Man arts are really good. I like that a lot. It really is.
But yeah, I think that's all we got to say about this deck today. This deck sadly cannot run Valiant Assault because Valiant Assault is on air. It is not on life. So I would say if you're going to play Deku 1 now, completely rebuild this guy and maybe take my fellow streamer Tamron Cardwell's advice and, here's his deck list.
Yeah, we have Izuku Midoriya. We have 3 back alley.
3 back alley. 4
Texas Smash.
4 jabs.
4
3
jab.
strikes. 2 throws. 2 cowlings. 2 valiant. 2 wind up.
Yeah.
4 plus ultra. 2 create. 4 1 with nature. 4 can't be fixed. 3 pull. 3 note taking. 4 passing. 3 self-sacrifice. 4 destined. 2 specialist. 2 to the rescue. 4 bonds. 2 lost. 2 high value.
Yeah, he's a big stand for Deku 1, and I have to give him props for that. He's been loyal since day one.